to Mantis Chronicles. Welcome to Mantis Chronicles. Whether you're a martial artist or just curious about the Kung Fu world, you've found your place. Here, we dive into the art of mastery, the philosophy of movement, and the stories that shape us.
So, Daitang Quan Jiu Jitsu. So, it's pretty much ground fighting, ground controlling, boxing. When you use the word Chuan, it usually means boxing or fist. Okay, and Daitang meaning, the ground fighting, ground controlling. And of course, the Jiu Jitsu, using the word that's coming down from, that we've used from Japanese Jiu Jitsu to Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and whatnot. Because in the Chinese martial arts, we talk a lot about Qin Na, which is also referred to as grappling. So another way of saying grappling is wrestling, jiu-jitsu. You'll see the same thing in catch wrestling, sambo. It's being able to fight at a higher level when you're on the ground, like if your back's on the ground, if you hit the ground. Someone's on top of you, you're on top of them. And in the praying mantis style, there's references to Daitang that go back pre-1920s. And from what I gather, there was a lot of more ground fighting in the Chinese arts prior to that time. And a lot of times this has to do with political or military events, wars and whatnot that change things. So the Daitang is when I first got into the training Mantis with Sifu Fogg, Raymond Fogg, he would mention the ground fighting, the Daitang stuff, but wasn't teaching a whole lot of it at that time. But my Sihings, John Chang and Brandon Jones, they would talk a lot about it, about how Sifu Fogg would taught them a lot of it. So, and then you would see these movements, these Daitang movements in the forms where you would roll and then you would do some sweeps from the ground and some kicks. And if with your imagination, you could kind of see where it would be sweeping, where it would be kicking. But a lot of the applications weren't clear. They weren't shown. And if, like I say, if you're studying in the Mantis history, there's constantly references to Daitang. So it's been a part of the system, but for some reason, it just hasn't been passed down readily. I had also seen videos of Raymond Nelson playing hands and using the Daitang. But it was, by the time I started learning, I wasn't seeing a lot of it. A lot of it wasn't being taught. It was very physical and demanding and hard on the body. So that may be part of it. I think maybe not everyone had taken the time to learn it, or not a lot of teachers that were actually teaching it. Especially have wooden floors and stuff. So yes, and it was more common to see, especially in the 60s, 70s, early 80s, people training in parks more. So yeah, on the grass, it'd be much, easier on the body and whatnot. I would also see in traditional styles of karate, they would have some of the Daitang stuff you could see, like the basic self-defense part, but I wasn't seeing anybody diving deep into it, like you would see in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. I would see video clips of what's called dog style, Kung Fu. There was a lot more like ground fighting. The monkey style has a lot of the, low stance, low sweeps, cause there's sweeps from standing and there's sweeps from, the middle range too, as far as like high, middle, low. And, but not all the styles would really work a lot on those really low sweeps. It's one thing to do them in the forms, but how many people were applying them to their fighting? And then also dealing with the situation once, a person did get knocked down, what was the best way to defend themselves to get back up without getting kicked or, jumped on top of or whatnot. So really, I always had an interest to it, and I would always hear, we're always taught, go with the flow, keep the flow going. So we'd be playing hands with the striking, the chin-all, the locks, joint locks, chokes, whatnot, taking people down. But a lot of times once we got to the ground, that flow kind of stopped. It wasn't as smooth of a transition as it was from the standing to the takedowns and whatnot. Well, we were taught how to roll, so you could roll out of stuff, or how to break fall, or how to fall like in Sway Jiao. We're taught how to fall a little different way to protect our head and whatnot, and toughen up the body. But a lot of times, like I say, people would hit the ground, and if they're not used to being on the ground, it's like a fish out of water. They're just not quite sure what to do. And if they're not practicing on the ground, you got to take the time to work your kicks from the ground too, not just kicking in the air, but kicking on mitts and pads from your back and from your side. And so, like I said, it wasn't really until I started training Hawaiian Kempo that, on the whole MMA scene, to where you're seeing more people kicking from the ground, up kicks and takedowns and sweeps, and then adding striking as we're going through Jiu Jitsu part of it, or wrestling with strikes. So that's when I really started, seeing it and practicing it more. And of course, to get better at my ground, I started training Brazilian Jiu Jitsu to help my Hawaiian Kempo, which all this was to help my Mantis. And then from there, I just, from studying Jiu Jitsu more, the wrestling more, I just started seeing all these moves that we were doing. I was starting to see them, recognizing those moves from our forms. So a lot of it was happening was, reverse engineering a lot of the forms or pieces of things that I taught. So I had to do the work of going from not only from our striking to takedowns to ground, but striking to trapping to ground, and then from the ground adding the trapping. So it's very common to see these things in MMA training and in MMA fights, and maybe some, like I say, BJJ catch, wrestling and whatnot, sambo, but you didn't see a lot of that in the Kung Fu. And I wasn't being exposed to it. I wasn't able to learn all those things. I had to, like I say, study these other styles together. And a lot of times I would hear, and you will hear this, teachers saying, oh, when you go to the ground, just use your Kung Fu. Well, yes and no. I say that if you know ground fighting and you've been experienced to it, like training Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, then yes, you're much more equipped to apply your Kung Fu. But for people who never go to the ground and just fight standing all the time, when they go to the ground, most of the time their Kung Fu is not going to work. Not the way they think it. And it's not until these people start testing themselves do they find that out. And most of the time, these really good stand-up practitioners, they truly believe they're going to do much better than they do. And when they get with someone who's on, skilled on the ground, they have a huge awakening, And this is not, we're not talking about, straight up street fighting and, fights to the death. And we're talking about, practicing martial arts, going into a gym, and without using weapons and whatnot to defend yourself, just being able to use your hand skills. And most of them fall short. Because the thing is, when you're stand up, a lot of your power comes from your waist. You're generated from your waist, from your legs. And when you get to the ground, that's taken away. So you got to learn how to generate power and energy in a whole different way. Practitioners who are better at stand-up, when they go to the ground, a lot of the things that they think is going to help actually puts them in a bind. So it's like counterintuitive in a sense. Yes, there's so many people who just think they'll never go to the ground. And, you know, just, being in a lot of self-defense situations, being in a lot of fights, the reality is you could be in a situation and slip. It could be raining. You step on a painted curb or sidewalk and or uneven ground. You're slipping. You're dealing with a couple different people. There's a lot of ways you could be on the ground, and it doesn't always have to be someone, knocking you to the ground or throwing to the ground. There's a lot of ways to end up on the ground. You can make a mistake. So, and a mistake that's, you step wrong. You're not paying attention to your surroundings. But then again, someone could drag you down. So there's so many situations where you could get to the ground. Because a lot of times when people, start to panic and they realize they're losing at stand up, they're either going to rush you and you're going to have to deal with the grappling aspect, takedown defense, and, potentially be on the ground. Or there are a lot of times they're just going to create space and try to get away from you. But a lot of times they're going to, especially when they're invested in the fight and they're not doing so well striking, they're going to rush you. And you need to have an answer for that. Way before Iron Mantis was a thing, I was just training 7-star praying mantis. Of course, I did some eagle claw and hung guard, and I was enjoying all that. And then I started training with Sifu David Pickens with Sui Zhao. That's what really opened my eyes and changed things for me, because just seeing the throws and learning the throws, I was easily able to reverse engineer some of the forms. I just saw this. Okay, wait. I was like, wait, we just did this. He just taught me this form. We're working on this takedown, this throw, and it's like exactly the same moves from this form. So that's kind of where it first started. The Sui Zhao really, changed my martial art skills. And I had done some, a little bit of judo here and there, like most martial art schools through the 80s and whatnot. They had little, pieces of that, takedowns and stuff, and throws and whatnot. And then it was from there getting into Hawaiian Kempo, which was really using, setting up the takedowns with strikes and then going from striking to takedown to ground. And then, like I say, then it was the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu that really just took it. It just I just kept diving deeper and deeper into ground controlling, ground fighting, however you want to call it. And the whole time I always knew it was like, hey, I always knew there was, the Daitang, in the old literature in the Mantis. And there was a lot of the forms, and even in the Tiger Crane system, there's some sets too that, you're doing these Daitang moves. There's a lot of them in 2-person sets. Like there's a lot of single leg, double leg, a lot of these moves that you see in ground fighting, you see them in the 2-person sets too. You see the people practice them in the 2-person sets, but you're not seeing them practice them more live on the floor. It's like you're not seeing it, translate over, So as you know, forms are great and they're good exercise and they're a way to remember techniques, but you also got to have drills to apply them. Well, I will say that besides, and also from the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, I then went on. That was, mainly training with Luigi Mondelli. Then I got with Kenny Johnson with Bolt Wrestling. So he was also a BJJ guy. He was teaching MMA fighters, UFC champions, and so that really had a huge influence on me too. Because working with someone who's he's a great wrestler, but he also understands jiu-jitsu and he understands striking. And so I was already kind of in that mindset too. John Hackelman was as well. Luigi was. So I was just around people who were high levels in jiu-jitsu and wrestling, or Kempo, but they all, and then me, Kung Fu, but we all had the same mindset. So that's what really helped me. It made it an easy mindset to be in. And then learning from them, it helped me just, add the other pieces from the Mantis system into it. And like I say, a lot of it has to do with the chi sao, the trap hands, the way we move, the way we, stick and follow and trap. And so, trying to use the person's energy against them, like knowing if they grab me, I also have them and whatnot. These little principles like that. I remember when Kenny Johnson came and did the seminar at my school. It was all on wrestling. But I remember at the end of the seminar, I was blown away because I was like, wow, he just taught 8 of the 12 principles. And whether he knew it or not. So I was like, that's when I really started to understand how much trapping hands was like, wrestling with strikes. So even in the wrestling, they have hand fighting. We call it sticky hands, or we call it plain hands. You start seeing more of the similarities than the differences. The way we in the Iron Mantis system approach the ground fighting is, yes, we get to the ground and pound aspect, but it's good to isolate teaching methods. Like if, you want to get better at your hands, we have our little, our Mantis boxing series, or we just work on boxing and kickboxing techniques. And if we want to get good at takedowns and ground, we just isolate just working on that. And there's times when we'll just isolate, the ground fighting, meaning that yes, our goal is to have strikes and kicking and whatnot in the ground fighting. But I do like to start, practitioners off in the gi without striking, because it just takes some of the variables out. Because especially when people first come in and they're like, oh, I want to learn ground, but I want to make sure it's with striking and stuff. And I say, okay, I'll work with them. And when I am doing the ground and the strikings, they're overwhelmed. So they're so stressed out, they're not really able to learn the ground. So it's like, I take the striking out just so we could focus on the basics and fundamentals of ground fighting, Jiu Jitsu. Okay. And what I like to do, what I like to have my students do is, in general, do one class of gi a week. Then we have another class of no gi, and we add in the striking. And so usually if I'm doing no gi, I prefer to do strikes with that. And then we'll have a trapping hands and playing hand class. So it's good to isolate these practices, and then also have space to bring them together to where they use all of them. So when we're playing hands with no gear, this is controlled sparring. We're dealing with strikes, blocks, hooks, grabbing, just like we would do with arm drags and whatnot. And then of course takedowns and takedown defense. And if we end up on the ground, how to defend ourselves, keep from being submitted or knocked out on the ground, and then how to get up safely. So it's a smooth flow from outer range, long range, middle range, close range, takedowns, ground, and then working our way up. I would say, the first year of training, we focus heavy on the basic ground movements like shrimping, buck and bridge, hip heist, sprawl, or backdrops. And so by doing a lot of those solo drills and then doing the applications on them, they really get a good understanding of the basic movements, technical get up, how to get up. So, it doesn't, I wouldn't say it takes a year, but normally I see within a year, person's has a pretty good understanding, of that and the takedowns and cause when you're training with other people, you feel it. It's one thing to look at people doing it. It's another thing to feel it yourself. And that's how you're going to get good, is by just constantly doing your takedowns, constantly doing the takedown defense. And then after that first year, it just, escalates each year after that, meaning that person significantly gets better, each year. In teaching the Daitang Quan within the Iron Mantis system, of course, is based on self-defense first, but we have a lot of IBJJF champions within our system. We have MMA champions. We have Sanda champions, kickboxing champions there. So, our system, even though it's a complete system like that, if someone wants to compete in, let's say, Jiu Jitsu, or they want to go to a kickboxing, or MMA, the sports side of it, they do very well. So it easily translates to it. It's just because you're learning the true fundamentals that are proven to work, you just have to know the rules of the competition and make sure you don't break those rules. As long as you don't break those rules, you're going to do fine. And then, of course, if those who are getting serious about competition, it's just, then you're going to have some competition training. You're going to up your sports performance training. You're just going to work a little bit more than the average student to make sure that, you're going to have better odds at winning. Because, as you know, skill can only take you so far when you're dealing with someone who's stronger or better shape. Because you could be really, way higher skill than someone else, but you get put in a competition where you're doing several rounds, and if you start gassing, even though your technique's better, you're going to lose, and that happens a lot. Not always, but that's especially at the lower levels. It shows, but you'll see it at the higher levels too. But most of the time when people are at the higher levels, they've already got that handled. You're not going to see people at the highest levels nowadays being out of shape. They're going to, they're doing great camps. Decades ago, it was different. But now most people understand the importance of, having their fitness camps outside of just their, martial skills. That's why in our system, we also have the, strength and conditioning, and then, sports performance training, specifically for, the day-to-day, martial arts, trying to be healthy and strong, and then also building those athletes up to where they can compete. Not only, the power speed athlete training, but also, track work, getting your cardio up to higher levels.
That is all for today. Thank you for listening. Please share, comment, and follow us in all our social media. Until next time.